Well, welcome back to the Always Free podcast. Got a real treat for you this week as I caught up with one of my most significant mentors, Dr. John Demartini, and we discussed human behavior, human potential, and really addressed some not only topics that are important right now, but topics that tend to come up time and time again whenever the world is going through some sort of change, and yet have timeless principles, timeless answers that are going to help you regardless of what situation you're in. So I was lucky enough to sit down at the library at the Bloomsbury Hotel in London, where he just recorded the audible version of the foreword that he kindly wrote for my book, which was phenomenal. And we had a great conversation, so I can't wait for you to hear it. And if this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, please go back to episode 1 after this. You're going to get the most listening from there. But stay tuned for this one because you're in for a real treat. Dr. John Demartini, thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me again.
It's always such a pleasure. And the conversations that we have, topics we cover are just time and time, no matter what's happening in the world. There are universal things that I love to talk about that are prevalent no matter what's going on in the world. And one of those things is how I see people reacting to things. There's lots of stuff going on in the news at the moment, people taking sides. And I find that a lot of the anxiety and depression is caused by taking a side, or a lot of the pain comes from actually having this idea that there shouldn't be another side. What can you say about that?
I guess the best thing to do is use an analogy of a magnet, or maybe a coin in a magnet. You try to chop a magnet in half and try to get the positive pole. You have two magnets with positive and negative. You go, well, I must not have done it fast enough. I'm going to do it faster this time. And now you have 4 magnets with positive and negative. So it's futile to try to get a one-sided magnet. And the same thing in life. If you imagine your worth was based on the number of coins that you were able to accumulate, but you only want the positive heads of the coin, you don't want the tails of the coin, you're not going to accumulate any worth because you're trying to get rid of half of yourself.
Yeah.
And people try to get rid of half of themselves thinking that they're going to love themselves by getting rid of half of themselves and trying to only be one-sided.
Yeah.
And this is futile.
Yeah, they also they try to please and appease other people as well, so the expectations of other people, which is kind of like, if you're doing that and trying to live in someone else's expectations, you're really off track to achieving any sort of life that you want.
I've defined depression as a comparison of your current reality to a fantasy that you're addicted to. And a fantasy as that you're going to get others to live in your values, or you're going to get and find people that are one-sided, or you're going to live in somebody else's values and that you're going to be one-sided. And these are futile. They're unsustainable, and they're signs of an amygdala awareness instead of an executive function. Our amygdala wants to avoid a pain and seek a pleasure, avoid a predator and seek a prey, avoid a challenge and seek a support. So it's striving for that which is unobtainable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable constantly. And it's, for emergency purposes, it appears to transiently demonstrate a so-called success. But long term, these are inevitable, these two sides of life. The difference between a fantasy and a real objective in life is a fantasy has a positive pole without a negative pole, and an objective has a positive and negative pole that you mitigate the negative pole on and calm down the positive pole to get more neutral or objective. It's something that's obtainable. Imagine going into a relationship where you have an expectation on the relationship to be support without challenge, kind without cruel, nice without mean, positive without negative, peaceful without wrath, considerate without inconsiderate, advantage without disadvantage. You have a fantasy. No relationship's going to provide you one side. When you do things that support this person's values, they're going to be nice as a pussycat. When you do things that challenge your values, they're going to be mean as a tiger. They're going to have both sides. So we can see that pretty easily in a relationship dynamic, but it applies to every goal that we ever try, anything we strive for. If we strive for ourselves to be one-sided, we're going to have futility. If we strive for a goal to be one-sided, it's going to be futile. And the more we strive for a one-sided goal, the more distress we have when the other side comes.
Yeah, and you mentioned relationships, but I see relationships all the time, and they see that when your values are being challenged, that's what causes people to break up. When in actual fact, for me and my wife anyway, we've been together 23 years, and we're very appreciative of our upsides and downsides, and I'm good at what she's not good at, and she's good at what I'm not good at. And
well, that's the purpose of marriage, to find somebody you can delegate low priority stuff to.
Right, right. But it's ironic that people split up over not appreciating that, right?
Well, as long as they're addicted to pleasure without pain, peace without war, positive without negative, and one-sidedness, the volatility of a relationship will be extreme. Because they're radically searching for that which is unobtainable and radically trying to avoid that which is unavoidable. And that's the source of suffering, as the Buddha said. So, but when somebody can understand that the support and challenge is necessary to keep us authentic. If we go up and go into pride, we need something to bring us down. If we go into shame, we need something to bring us up. So a relationship is going to give you challenge when you're cocky and humbleness, and support when you're humble. And it's going to keep you authentic. I think that's the real purpose of a relationship, is to help us become authentic and maximize our potential in life.
I 100% agree. And I feel I think happiness is just understanding that, appreciating that.
Yeah, I prefer to use the word fulfillment.
Fulfillment.
Myself. Because happiness has such a polarity associated with it by most people. And the pursuit of that which is unobtainable, happiness without sadness, is not going to happen.
No.
I ask people, a lot of people, am I speaking for almost 3 years now, I ask people, how many of you have moments of calm and moments of turmoil, moments of peace, moments of war, moments of happy and moments of sad? Everybody got their hands up. It's not like hard to see, but those that are searching for a one-sided thing are frustrated and angry because life's not matching their fantasy. And that's why the depression is there. Depression is actually there as a healthy response to break your addiction to its opposite.
Yeah.
I always say that negative thinking is necessary to break the addiction to positive thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need both.
Absolutely.
If I was to sell you land on Mars right now, you need some negative thinking. Otherwise, you'd be gullible. You need healthy skepticism to balance gullibility.
Yeah.
Both of them are needed in to balance your life.
So people slip into this depression when they feel like what they're trying to achieve, or their lifestyle right now, is they have a fantasy of what it should look like, and what it actually is like is far from that.
Yeah, anytime they compare their current reality to a fantasy that's not current reality, you're going to have disappointment. Or if it exceeds your expectation, you're going to have joy. If it doesn't, you're going to have sorrow.
Yeah.
But you're creating it. Instead of honoring what is, you're comparing it to what it isn't.
Yeah. But I see it all the time. How do you get out of that? For someone listening, like if they are in that state and they feel like they should be someone else, what can they do to be more appreciative to the position they're in now? Or
Well, everybody's got a set of priorities, a set of values. I think we discussed this. And anytime, and then whatever's highest on the value is an intrinsic value, things that they spontaneously are inspired to do. And as you go down the list of values, progressively it become more extrinsic, and you require motivation to get you to do. So you have a young boy who loves video games. He doesn't need to be reminded to do his video games, but to do his homework, he needs to be motivated. Reward if he does it, punishment if he doesn't, kind of thing. External motivation can't compete with intrinsic drive. And so anytime you're doing something that's really high on your values, that's really inspiring to you, you spontaneously act in a way to achieve it. In the medial prefrontal cortex, which is called the executive functioning center, we have spontaneous action potentials to take action literally through inspiration towards something when it's high in our values. When we do that, we're more reasonable, more objective, more strategic planning oriented, more self-governed, and are not in our amygdala, and more likely to set objectives that are obtainable. And that's the purpose of strategic planning, is to transform fantasies into true objectives that are obtainable. But if we're not doing higher value activities, and we're not delegating lower priority things, And we end up doing those because we think we should or ought to or supposed to or got to or have to or must or need to according to some outside authority that we've subordinated to. We will put the blood glucose and oxygen out of our executive center and down into our amygdala, where we are now wanting to survive. And survival is avoiding a predator and seeking a prey. So anything that supports your value represents a prey, and anything that challenges your value represents a predator. So we're now in survival mode instead of thrival mode. When we do, we're more polarized. We're more likely to be searching for positive without negative, and happy without sad, and peace without war, and pleasure without pain, and then feel defeated and depressed because life's not matching our fantasy.
Do you believe the whole world and universe is perfectly in balance, like a balance sheet?
Well, in physics, there's a number of symmetries and conservation laws, and one of them is the charge conservation law. The total amount of positive and negative in the universe is constant. If we stop and think about that, that's pretty significant. The total amount of energy in the universe, positive and negative energy, are believed to be zero, completely balanced. The idea that linear momentum and angular momentum and positive and negative charges and the leptons and baryons, which are light and heavy particle systems, all have a symmetry. So there's no reason why we really, if we look at the physics of it, to expect a one-sided world. It doesn't make any sense. But we do that out of moral hypocrisies that we've been indoctrinated by, usually institutions that like to control people.
Yeah, and people in power, presidents.
When you're in your amygdala, you're living with a kind of a fantasy of an absolute morality. When you're in your executive center, you live with more situational ethics and more of a relative understanding, and you realize that everything has a pair of opposites. Everything has upsides and downsides. Every event.
Yeah.
All events are neutral until somebody comes along with some subjective bias and interprets it in a way that's favorable or unfavorable, seek or avoid, which causes our amygdala's impulses and instincts to react, which Freud called the id, because we're now acting like an animal that's basically trapped in a hamster cage.
You mentioned morality. I think one of the biggest reasons that there is divides or people don't live the life they want is down to their perception around money, and the fact that is seen as a morality thing. So the fact that money is there's people who feel like they can't charge a certain amount for a product, or they just don't feel easy. And there's, on the other side, there's people who just charge and don't provide any valuable, and they rip people off. And so can you talk a little bit about morality and money and how that might affect people's day to day?
A number of years back, 20-something years ago, I wrote a book called How to Make a Hell of a Profit and Still Get to Heaven.
I've read it. Yeah.
And I was on my way to a restaurant.
Red book, right?
Yeah, it's red.
Yeah.
I was on my way to an Italian restaurant to have dinner, and the title came in my mind, and I thought, I'm going to write that. Many people struggle with that because of indoctrination from religious institutions that have skewed the understanding of money. If you go and do a service and you shortchange somebody on service but expect a thing and try to get something for nothing, narcissistically, you may temporarily have a win-lose dynamic, but they're not going to want to keep doing business with you. So it's unproductive, ultimately. So it's not a long-term strategy that's going to go anywhere. If you minimize yourself and sacrifice for the customer and give and give and give, kind of like an altruism, not a narcissism, but kind of an altruism, you're not going to want to keep going to work. And that's self-defeating. So anytime we exaggerate ourselves and minimize our customer, or minimize ourselves and exaggerate our customer, and don't have equity between ourselves and them and equanimity within ourselves, we're exaggerating and minimizing ourselves, we have non-sustainable futility in transactions, economic transactions. Now, we're not being authentic when we're proud. We're not being authentic when we're shamed or narcissistic or altruistic. We're being authentic when we're ourselves, and we realize we have pure reflective awareness. What we see in them, we see in us. And we see them as equals, and we know that if we have a sustainable fair exchange, we're both going to want to continue to do business. So that sustains it. But that state of equanimity that leads to material wealth, ultimately, is also spiritual mastery. So true spirituality, which is authenticity, which is inspiration, because living by your highest values, you're more objective and in that state, more likely to have sustainable fair exchange, and more philanthropic when you do that. You're less likely to be altruistic and narcissistic polarities. That occurs when you're in the amygdala. You're trying to get something for nothing. Or you feel guilty, you try to give something for nothing. I always say altruism is compensation for shame and guilt of the past with a hidden agenda of the future. And narcissism is compensation for pride and self-righteousness of the past and a hidden agenda of the future. But when you're actually in sustainable fair exchange and you're authentic, there's no hidden agenda. It's fully disclosed. And you're in sustainable fair exchange. And you have utility, maximum utility instead of futility. So true spirituality, which is that authentic state, which is an inspired state of getting to do what you love and doing it with the people you love, and materiality, material wealth, are inseparable. In fact, wealth comes from the word real, which means well-being, whole being. Yeah. So now we're whole. Here we're conscious of our positives and unconscious of our negatives. We're narcissistically expecting something for nothing. Here we're conscious of our negatives and unconscious of our positives, trying to give something for nothing. Both getting or giving something for nothing is non-sustainable. It's futile. But having sustainable fair exchange is utile. And that's the thing that spirituality and material meet right there. A sustainable reciprocity transaction.
If someone's listening to this and thinking, because in real world, what you've just explained is someone creating a product or a service to give value to someone and they get paid. And both feel like they've got a good deal.
A non-zero sum game.
Yeah. It sounds idealistic, but finding your fair exchange is another matter. I'll tell you a story. My wife, Sarah, she loves animals. And she sat at home for a long time. She brought up the kids, and then she realised that her values changed slightly. The kids didn't need her as much anymore, so she felt like she needed more fulfillment. And she didn't really need money, so we just said, look, how about you walk dogs? You know, go and walk some dogs, you get fit, exercise, a bit more money. And I said, it's best to put together some packaged pricing so that you can agree the cost. And she'd already taken on some clients charging per hour. So she started doing these dog walks. And one day she rings me and goes, these people haven't come back, you know, they've left me in their house, you know. And at that moment you realised what her time was worth, because no matter how much she loved animals, you know, she tells me she would do it for nothing. But at that point where they would cross the threshold of taking the piss.
Wasn't fair exchange.
It wasn't fair to Sarah, right? But that is an intangible thing. You have to kind of find that. How do you find what is fair? Like, how do you find your worth?
Well, we have an internal Geiger counter, or whatever you want to call it, internal set point.
For sure.
I do an exercise with my clients sometimes for fun, because they sometimes are, you know, want to figure out, what do I charge for my hourly fee or my package or my product or whatever. And I just do a little exercise on them. I say, can you turn your thumb up and thumb down? They go, yeah. I said, I'm going to start with a ridiculous price, $50 an hour. If you want it to go higher than that, put your thumb up. When you get to a point where it seems like that's a little high, you'll go like this, and then it'll go down. So I'll say 50, and I'll say 100, and I'll go to 150, and I'll keep going it, and they'll just keep going like this, and then all of a sudden they'll go, and they have an intuitive sense for what they imagine their worth is based on the services that they're providing. They have this intuitive sense. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not a fixed thing.
No.
It's just what it is at that moment based on their ratios of perceptions, their image of their perception based on what they're doing or providing. Now, if I go in there and I have them write down 100 benefits to your clients, you take a list of your clients, you think about what they value, and you write down 100 benefits of that same service, same product, same time, service, whatever it is, 100 benefits to the client of you providing that, and stack up more advantages, and 100 drawbacks of charging anything less, or 100 benefits of the new fee that you prefer, and 100 drawbacks of anything less. When they're done, they will immediately now reset that psychologically, because the ratios of their perception of what they're offering goes up. And when they do, they go, that's now fair exchange. So there's no set thing out there. There's possibly an average that people offer out there, but if you can stack up more advantages and show that there's more added value than what the average is, you can get it. It's a mindset. So whenever I have somebody that wants to raise their fees, for instance, I do that exercise. I find out where they are now, what they feel comfortable with, and then I go and do the exercise. Then I do that same exercise again, and it's gone up.
Yeah.
And then I can do that, and once they do that for about 3 months, I can do that exercise again, and they can do it. They can raise it again.
Right.
And what they'll do is they'll now draw in a different set of clientele that'll match their new image of their product, service, or idea. So if you can't see the benefits of how they're going to win out of it, you can win by getting more income. That's great.
Yeah.
But if you do it where they get more benefit, you can look them straight in the eye and you can offer the service a lot more smoothly, because you realize this is a really good deal.
Yeah.
But you have to do it. I was in a doctor's office, oh boy, way back in the 80s. And I was doing consulting in the 80s with a lot of doctors, almost 1,000 clinics during that decade. And we had that same issue. The doctor was devaluing compared to the average doctor. He was devaluing. So I had them go and make a list of the products, the utilities, the features, the advantages, the benefits, and the opportunities that their product offered. And I made them answer. I made the whole staff write 30 answers between them. They, as a group, 30 answers to each of those. How is it utilized? What's unique about it? What are the advantages? What are the features? What are the benefits, etc.? And the services they're providing. And we all did that as a group, the whole group. Their income went up 20% over the next month, 20%. Because what they did is they were now, in their mind, framing what they're providing from another perspective. So if we can stack up the advantages, and these advantages were not just advantage to them, but the advantage to the customer, the client, the patient in this case. Once they did that, they can look you straight in the eye and they know the value of it and they can state it without hesitation. Now, if a person is collecting money, we found this in the doctor's office, if a person's collecting money, they hire somebody that's collecting, and they feel that the value of the service they couldn't afford, they will have difficulty collecting the money. So we made sure that nobody was working collecting money was in a position that they couldn't afford the average service in the clinic, by making sure they had a liquid capital reserve of that amount. And the moment they did, the overall collections went up because their mindset was different. And if they feel, as Foster Hibbard said, he used to work with Napoleon Hill, and I used to lecture with him in 83 to about 88. We found out that whenever somebody's done anything that they feel is not something that they feel proud of, they feel guilty of, shame of, every moment they do an act that they feel guilty or ashamed of, they devalue themselves and they feel unworthy of receiving, and they'll do altruistic acts in order to compensate, to feel back into fair exchange, because they have this intuitive sense for set point. So if I go in and find out what they feel guilty or ashamed about, itemize them, list them all down, and make a list of everything you've ever done that you would never want anybody to know about, or don't want people to know, or on public records you wouldn't want them to see that, anything like that, and then find out who is involved as a result of your action and how did it benefit them. If they do that exercise, it takes 2-3 hours to do, their willingness to receive goes up immediately. I mean, it's their willingness to be able to save and invest and value themselves, and the way they buy things change, because instead of buying things to feel better about themselves through consumerism, buying brands, they buy things out of practicality and they invest the difference.
Yeah.
And it's quite different to watch this after 3-hour exercise.
Incredible. I've seen that happen personally. So I like this kind of theme of vocation for now. The next key is to do things that you enjoy, and you mentioned delegation. Really practically, a real practical way of what people should do in order to start understanding what to delegate, or what they need to do in order to move into more of the things that they find inspiring, in a practical way, because they still have to make money.
Well, I was 27 years old, and I had opened up my practice, and I went out and realized I was majoring in minors and minoring in majors. I went out and bought a book called The Time Trap by Alec McKinsey. And after devouring that book, I made a 6-column chart. So whoever's watching this, do this. Take a piece of paper, well, a series of pieces of paper, and put 5 lines on it so you have 6 equal spaced columns. And in the far left column, that's this side over here, I guess, my right, write down every action that you do in a day. Every action you do in a day over a 3-month period.
3 months.
The 3-month period. So that means anything that you do at home or at work, and break it down into professional and personal, or work and home or whatever, write on every single thing you're doing. And I don't mean vague generalized sales. Write down the action steps you're doing in sales, the actual action steps you're doing that you're taking up time doing. And make a list and an inventory of what you actually spend your day on. I guarantee this exercise is worth its time. Guarantee it. I mean, I've had people do it, thousands of people do it, and they all say thank you for doing it. But make a list of everything you're doing in a day. And while you're doing that, you are already intuitively going, I am majoring in minors and minoring in majors. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff that's not really not priority, not meaningful.
Yeah.
But just go do it so you're not lying to yourself about what you're doing and how productive you are and you're doing the best you can and all that other stuff. Just make a list of what you actually do. Then on the next column, write down how much does that produce per hour? Because that means you're filling somebody's needs and they're willing to pay you for whatever that service is or action is. So if you're not getting paid for it, you're devaluing your time. So make a list of what you're actually doing per hour doing that action. So in my case, I was opening up a clinic, right? And I did an exam. It was $125. I could do it in 10 minutes. 6 times that was 6 times 125, right? If you multiply it out, it comes out X. I do a narrative report. It was $400. It would take me 2 hours. That's $200 an hour. And so I broke it down to how much does it produce per hour. And more than 30% of what I was doing was zero. I was literally doing work that was not producing anything. And I was realizing that I was favoring these things because it was producing, and I was wanting to dodge these things, but they were crucial for my business. So I'm unconsciously not motivated to do what's needed to be done. So if I'm not delegating, it ain't getting done, and I'm holding my business at a plateau. So I wrote down every dollar that it was, the best extrapolation I could think of at the time. And sometimes I can combine 4 or 5 things to get a number and then kind of disperse it. How valuable is that? And just estimated it. When I got through with that, I then reprioritized it on the thing that was most productive to least productive. I found out that the very thing that was most productive wasn't what I was trained for. Actually getting out and sharing and educating and speaking, I could leverage myself economically better than I could being in a cubicle doing clinical work, which was surprising because I studied for 10 years to be a clinician. And then I realized that that wasn't the most productive thing I could be doing with my time, which was a bit of a paradox because it's an internal conflict because I'm studied for this, but this is what actually produces. So I had to go in through there and look at that priority list. The next column was how much meaning does it have on a 1 to 10 scale? Because if it's a 10, it means you can't wait to get up in the morning and do it. You're inspired spontaneously and act towards it. You don't have to be ever motivated to do it.
Yeah.
A 1 means, oh, I got to do that. So I basically went through that entire list and then reprioritized it based on meaning on a 1 to 10 scale. Now, luckily, some of my most 10s happened to be the ones that were most productive, and that's where your target is. If you can find something you can't wait to get up and do and something that is productive, now you've got your niche. There's your niche. And the next column was how much would it cost me to delegate that? Not just their salaries, but all cost. The paperclip, the space usage, the insurance, the training, the lost opportunity cost, the parking. I mean, everything about the cost of that employee. What's it cost for me to hire somebody to do that action equal or not greater than me, more competent than me? How much would it cost me to delegate that? So I could look at the spreads between what it can produce per hour versus what it can cost per hour. And then I reprioritized according to spread. So I knew where I could extract surplus labor value out of people by doing that. The next column was how much time do I actually spend on that per average day during that period. And the last one is the final prioritization, factoring in those 3 prioritized states. Once I did that, I knew where I need to put my energy. What was going to be the most meaningful, most productive, and which is going to be the one that I have, it's wiser for me to be doing and wiser not to be delegating versus the ones that are wiser to delegate. Once I got that down, I layered it into 10 layers and I hired one by one over the next 18 months. It took me 18 months to completely get all that off my plate except the highest priority 4 actions that I was to do that produced the most income. My income skyrocketed. I scaled up my business. I went from a little bitty office to a 5,000 square foot office with 5 doctors and 12 staff members all in 18 months. And it was because I really got truthful about what was priority. And it answers the question, what really is priority?
Yeah.
Because you're now looking at what fulfills you, so you're not sacrificing you, and what fulfills the customer because they're willing to pay. And it finds that balance that's sustainable.
And I take it the things right at the bottom are the cheapest things to delegate anyway. And
you start there. You always delegate the thing that anybody can, it's easy turnover, easy to find.
Yeah.
And because I think back in 1980s that was a $10 an hour job. Some of that stuff, and I could be making up to $18,000 an hour doing the presentations, and about $1,800 an hour doing clinical. So I need to be putting energy there. Yeah. And then I end up hiring doctors to train them on delegating that. And I went out, spoke, generated lots of patients, at least 100 new patients a month. And then I delegated some of the clinical, and then I only worked with the highest profile people that had the biggest influence. So I prioritized my patients, I prioritized what I did, I prioritized my procedures. I mean, I just became a priority fanatic, you might say. And it produced.
Love it.
The old 20-80 rule.
Yeah, the 20-80.
And the 20 of the 20 of the 20.
Yeah. There's a lot of, in the world right now, there's lots of jobs are changing, work dynamic, business dynamics, there's AI, there's jobs replaced, and there's lots going on. And there's a lot of people unsure about what a job is, what would they go into? Where do they need to navigate? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some of the most timeless, vocations or timeless services that people can offer that will be around for the rest of the time.
That's a good question. Yeah. Depending on how far AI goes, that we're going to be involved in AI management probably in the future. I mean, with I was working on the ship that I live on with a neurologist, and he was going through a relationship challenge. And he was a very bright guy, very bright neurologist and neuropsychiatrist, very highly intelligent, 81 years old, 82 years old. And he said, "John, I need to bat some ideas off you. I need your time." So he got some time with me. He also had another neuropsychiatrist that he respected, and he got their idea, and he got on AI chat, GPT chat or whatever, and asked what advice, these criteria, he asked all 3 of us. 80% of what was said on the chat was what we were saying. We all came to 80% overlap, which I thought was pretty impressive. So that means that anybody could be challenged and disrupted. Most anybody in any business could be challenged and disrupted. I don't think there's anybody that can say that they won't have that potential. But finding out the human element is the key. Yeah. Anything that you can offer that's a human element that AI is not going to be able to do, at least for a while. Because I was at a hotel recently, and I called downstairs, and the AI answered. And you want to choke AI. You want to call and say, "Give me a human being." Yeah. Because it wasn't answering, it wasn't understanding, it wasn't hearing, and it was a mess. Yeah. And so, as long as customer service requires a human element, then customer service will be one of those places. We'll get more refined and approximate as time goes on, probably with more skills. But if we can differentiate ourselves from AI by our own unique customer interaction and engagement and that human element, that's what allows us to continue our career path. But anybody could be disrupted, just about anybody.
Disrupted, for sure. Do you think as generations, like my kids and their kids, they have a less standard, so they might not get upset with the AI reception, and then it just becomes accepted that is the norm? And I wonder what that will do for humans and what we will look like. I mean, will that go full circle? We talk about balance. What's going to be missing? And this is just kind of not a question.
Well, nature, cultures that have used technology advance, and ones that don't. And so we're not going to stop using technology, and we're going to continue to refine it, and it's going to grow exponentially as far as intelligence. Right now, we've got most of the information that it's feeding off of is not necessarily accurate information. So we have to still discern and have criteria on how to discern what's true and what's not true. Because right now it's only set up based on the information that's out there, and that may not be true, so you're basing that data on what's just out there.
Yeah.
So there have to be discernments put in there, and the human element will be there, and humans are going to be needing to be able to help those processes. And so our job is to keep working and focusing and finding those things that differentiate us and where those loopholes are. It's just like the stock market and efficient, market hypothesis. You're looking for the little innuendos, and there's some people that take the time and knowledge and they can extract that and capture some of those elements. Most people can't. Well, the same thing in AI. We'll be able to differentiate ourselves from AI by those small subtlety differences and capitalize on it. The future, there's no doubt that kids are going to grow up with it. I mean, that's pretty evident. Yeah. They know how to do more on an iPhone. iPhones won't be here in a few years. Those will be gone. And there'll be clothes, there'll be tattoos, there'll be all kind of things out there that's probably going to be information-based. Yeah. And so I don't know if we can perceive right now. I don't know if I can. I was listening to Isaac Asimov in 1982 about the future, what the future held, the next 50 years. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but in 1982, it's worth watching. He nailed it. Isaac Asimov, he's a guy that was one of the brightest guys in science fiction writers, who wrote about 300 books. Very bright guy. He was an inspiration to me when I was 21, because I wanted to be able to have an influence like this guy. Yeah. But he was spot on. What he said in the interview in 1982 about what's going to happen, people will be carrying around a phone in their hand, people will be doing international communication on visual. I mean, he was just nailing it. And it's hard to see 100 years in the future. 100 years ago, they couldn't see this.
No.
We can't see that. It's going to be that drastically different. In fact, probably even more so than the last 100 years. So there's going to be disruption, but there's going to be new innovations, and we'll come up with new niches where we have to study and to learn and to adapt and build new businesses around where our skills will be.
You mentioned discernment, and I worry about that, because the whole point of this podcast is living a life of fulfillment, a life that you love. And a lot of people don't live that life because they make decisions based on other people's opinions or projected ideas or social pressures, social idealisms. And as a result of that, they make so many decisions that have a tiny little bit of resentment later on down the line because they're not quite where they thought they would be. And that was from humans. I wonder what's going to happen when people are just accepting advice from AI and, it's not even close to anyone that cares about them, giving them advice.
Well, if there's a niche where there's a gap in that, there'll be a new business for humans.
Right.
They'll be basically going in and looking at the plausibility of that information.
And synthesize
the paradoxes there.
For sure.
The word decision, and the way I look at it, comes from the word decide. There's insecticide, genocide, patricide, matricide, infanticide, homicide, suicide, you name it. Side means bring death. To decide means to bring death to an option. Between this or that, which one's going to die, which one's going to come alive. the amygdala automatically seeks for that which has the most advantage over disadvantage with a subjective bias. So as long as we're living in our lower values and trying to live in other people's expected value systems, we're going to have amygdala responses. We're going to have skewed view, and our discernment is going to be under the illusion that we're going to get more advantage and disadvantage. And then when the disadvantages come, we're going to be startled because we didn't do an objective. We did a kind of a fantasy. And that's what the executive center is about, not the amygdala, where it's able to look for things objectively, neutrally, to see both sides and to plan and mitigate the risk and calm down the fantasy sides. So you see the pros and cons and you see them more balanced. And then you don't react with decision, you spontaneously act out of something you'd really be inspired to do and to bring to the world. And most people are in the decisive, the amygdala is the deciding center. The governing center, the executive center, is calming it down and trying to bring it back into balance so you can actually see in advance with foresight what's actually going to occur. I was coming down with my wife, I think this was around 1998, I'm not sure the date. We were coming down the elevator, we were on the 62nd floor of Trump Tower living, and Donald lived above us. And we all came down together, Crazy Donald and my wife and I. And we're chatting and talking to him as we go down, because he's a funny, crazy guy. We get down to the lobby, and there's 12, we'll call it the 12 disciples. There's 12 guys, there's 2 girls and 10 guys down in the lobby waiting for him. We go through the swivel door to go out onto the street at 56th and 5th to go down to a Japanese restaurant. He goes across the same street and then veers over towards the plaza. As they're talking, we're listening to their conversations. And Donald has all these people that is with him are all people with contingency plans. They were working on the Hudson River project, and they were building these high-rise, beautiful buildings and tearing down old buildings. And so one person that was there was a geologist that wanted to know the history of all the geology. Is there any Indian reservations? Is there anything here that when we go into the ground, we're going to run into snags that's going to stall this project? So he had a person, and he says, I want to know everything that could interfere with our project. I want to know contingency plans on how do we solve it in advance before we go to ground. I want to know anybody who's a tenant in any of the buildings we're going to tear down. I need to know anybody that's stalling us and selling out their property so we get that property. I need to know about their life and what it is. We need to negotiate and find out what their needs are and negotiate them to get them out of the properties. Right? He was contingency planning and was foresighting everything that he could perceive that could go down. He had somebody that was involved in permits, to time permits to make sure that nobody's going to stall them. Somebody who's a competitive builder that's going to try to interfere with him. Everything that he could imagine going wrong. He had people specializing with foresight, trying to figure out what could go wrong. How do we solve in advance? And we're prepared. And there were 12 of them there, and they were discussing it as they're going across the street. We were listening in, and it's like, whoa, the amount of foresight that's getting projects done is pretty intense. And you don't see that behind the scenes, you just see this building going up. But that's the kind of thing, and that's the executive center, where you're anticipating the downsides and the upsides, meditating on the evils, as they say, the Stoics said, Marcus Aurelius. And you're basically making sure that you are aware of both sides, so you're not going after a fantasy and then broadsided by the nightmare that comes with it. Because there's always both sides.
And facing disappointment when...
Yeah, because you're disappointed because it's not matching your fantasy.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of the executive center, to go in and have foresight, to anticipate pros and cons, to make sure that they're balanced, so you're not making an amygdala decision, you're spontaneously acting with all the data in front. Claude Shannon, in his information theory, said that missing information is entropy and disorder. And reclaiming that information brings the order. So somebody who really wants to live with an ordered life is going to be able to ask questions to make them conscious of what they're unconscious of in their awareness. And the amygdala is always unconscious. The amygdala is seeing positives without negatives, or it's seeing negative without positives. The objective of the executive center is seeing both sides.
I'd love to just ask you one more question. You would describe as an inspired life. Like, what is freedom? What is fulfillment to you? Like, what is the end? Like, what is the goal?
Well, each individual has a different set of priorities and different set of values. If you're a mother and you're dedicated to raising a beautiful family of children, fulfilling those roles is what's inspiring. That's an inspiring life. To someone like myself who loves researching and teaching, that's an inspiring life. So it's finding out what the authentic set of values you have inside and looking at what those priorities are and giving yourself permission to fill your day with high priority actions that really spontaneously inspire you and delegate lower priority distractions that don't. And hand that over to people who have it on their highest value so they're inspired to do it, so you don't have to micromanage them and distract yourself by it. And giving them the opportunity to do what they love gives you the opportunity to do what you love, which is that win-win principle. And I think that that's really about all anybody can do is live by priority. And now you're up against this. As Jung said, do you have the courage to be yourself in a world that doesn't want you to be? The world wants you to fit in and you want to stand out. You want to make a difference. You can't make a difference fitting in and being like everybody else. You make a difference by you, being you. And the authentic set of values that you hold and giving yourself permission, regardless of whether people want that or not. I mean, Emerson said to be great is to be misunderstood. If you're going to be great at what you do, everybody around you is going to project their values onto you and try to get you to fit into what is conforming to them so they can get what they want. And you have the courage to articulate what your dream is in a way that it serves and inspires other people and engages other people to work and help you get the dream. They're getting to do what they love, you're getting to do what you love, and you're now prioritized in your actions on a daily basis. You don't have a stressful life if you've delegated everything else except what you love doing. Buffett doesn't like to go to meetings, right? He likes to go and read and study and things, so he delegates the rest. I'm the same way. I teach, I research, I write, and I travel. Most everything else I delegate. I haven't driven a car in 35 years. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I'm useless everything else. I even told my girlfriend, as you know, I said, if I was to delegate lovemaking to George Clooney, would you still love me? And she said, I'd love you even more. No, I'm joking there. But the point is that I believe that delegation liberates people from low priority, distracting, amygdala driving fantasies and immediate gratification.
Amazing. John, thank you very much. It's been such a great conversation. All of John's links and everything for everything he does is in or around this video, but is there anything you'd like to, is there anything particular you're working on at the moment or anywhere people can find you?
Well, if we just talked about values, on my website, drdemartini.com, there's the value determination process that is really, really worth the time spent.
Yeah, I recommend everyone does that.
Yeah, 30 minutes of your time, take the time to do that and do it again, because you'll try your best to not tell the truth the first time. Just go do it again and really answer the questions as they're presented and watch the videos on it to make sure you really do it, because I've been doing that for 47 years. Back in 1978, I asked a question: why do some people walk their talk and some people limp their life? Why do some people do what they say and some don't? And I narrowed it down to the study of axiology, which is study of values. Values that people have will determine what they're going to do spontaneously and what they need to be motivated to do. And if you have to be motivated to do what you say is important, it's not important. So motivation is a symptom, never a solution for maximizing human potential. So what I did is I realized that most people, when they do value determinations, they write down what they think it ought to be instead of what it is. And this exercise is a way of getting as close as we can get to objective data of what your life is demonstrating important to you. Because when you get there and get out of the oughts and shoulds and supposed tos and all the injected values by outer authorities and mothers and fathers and preachers and teachers and mores and conventions and traditions around you that are vying for your attention in your psyche, if you can get to what's really true and start structuring your life around that, you can liberate a whole lot of baggage and frustration. So that's one. And the only other thing I would mention is we have a new movie that came out in November called The Breakthrough Movie that I know will be a tearjerker for anybody that wants it. It's got 38 awards, film festival awards already. But The Breakthrough Movie, Demartini.
Amazing.
That's worth watching.
All right, thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you got a lot of value from it. And if you haven't already got a copy of my book, Always Free, you can go to alwaysfree.com and get yourself a copy, or you can go and get it on Amazon and start creating the life that you want.